Hey, everyone, and welcome back to the Book Summary Podcast. We're going on a deep dive today, and
Ooh, a deep dive.
yeah, into a world that you might recognize in yourself, the world of ADD.
Attention deficit disorder.
Yes, attention deficit disorder.
ADD.
ADD,
Yeah.
exactly. And we're going to be looking at this book, Driven to Distraction.
Yeah, this is a great book.
It's a fantastic book, and one of the things I think is so fantastic about it is that it's not a...
It's not a textbook. It's not like a...
It doesn't feel like a clinical,
No.
diagnosis manual or anything like that.
Right.
It's really just full of stories.
Yeah, it's stories about people.
Yes.
And their struggles with ADD.
And their lives.
Yeah.
And how ADD has affected them.
Yeah.
And one of the first stories they tell is about this guy named Jim.
Oh, yeah.
Jim is just full of ideas.
The best ideas.
The best ideas. He's got ideas that could revolutionize businesses, but he can't.
He can never seem to.
He can't follow through on any of them.
He has all these great ideas and no follow through.
And it's so sad.
Yeah, it's kind of heartbreaking in a way.
Because you see him and he's got this great mind.
You just want him to succeed.
And he's trying so hard, and he just keeps losing jobs.
Loses job after job.
Yeah, and and then you think, we all have times when we're like, oh, where are my keys? Or I forgot that appointment, or,
Yeah, we've all had those moments.
So how do we know, right?
Yeah.
How do we know when it's...
Where's the line?
Where's that line between just being a little forgetful and having ADD?
Yeah, and that's what's great about this book is it does sort of give you that framework.
Yeah, it lays it all out.
And the specific criteria that clinicians will use.
Right, the actual diagnosis criteria.
They make a diagnosis of ADD.
Because it can't just be that you misplace your keys once.
Right, or that you're late every now and then.
Exactly.
One of the things I was surprised about in this book was the history of ADD.
Oh, yeah.
We think about it as a modern thing.
A modern phenomenon. But it's not.
Well, it's not that modern.
It's not.
Right. It's been around. They've been seeing kids with these symptoms for a long time.
Yeah, and in fact, it was treated...
very badly.
Terribly.
Yeah, they didn't understand it at all.
No.
They didn't know what was going on.
And they thought it was just bad behavior.
Yeah, they thought these kids were just...
bad kids.
Bad kids. Troublemakers.
Yeah, and the book talks about how even as recently as the last century...
Oh, I know. It's shocking.
These overactive kids...
If they ever get the worst of it.
Were really subjected to some pretty horrific treatment.
It's really sad to think about.
It is.
It's really sad.
And, and so that also makes you think about the stigma.
Oh, there's so much stigma still around ADD.
That still surrounds ADD. And one of the things the book also doesn't shy away from is talking about those.
Like the social consequences.
The social, yeah, like how it affects your relationships.
Consequences of ADD. It's not just about work and school, it's about life.
And how it's not just about work or school.
Yeah.
It can really affect your relationships.
Oh, absolutely. Like in Jim's case.
Yeah, so with Jim, like with his girlfriend, even though she's so supportive.
She's such a sweetheart.
His kind of impulsivity.
And his forgetfulness.
Yeah, really strained their relationship.
Yeah. And I think for a lot of people with ADD, they really struggle with those social cues.
Yes.
Like they don't always pick up on those subtle hints.
And it's not
that they don't care.
No, it's not that they're not trying.
They just work differently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not intentional.
Right. And the book does a great job of explaining that. That it's not a personal failing, it's just how they're wired.
Yeah, and it's so important to remember that when you're interacting with someone with ADD.
Really, totally. You got to have empathy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things that the book also does so well is it talks about how ADD isn't this...
It's not one size fits all.
One size fits all.
Yeah, there's so many different ways it can show up.
And we meet all these different people in the book, all these different characters.
Yeah, like Carolyn.
Yeah, like Carolyn. Carolyn's the therapist.
She's so successful.
Successful therapist.
Yeah.
And she tells this story about her childhood.
Oh, I know. Always getting in trouble.
Always getting in trouble. Yeah, always pushing the boundaries.
Yeah, but she loved to read.
She loved to read. And she was so fiercely independent.
That's what I loved about her story.
And so it kind of makes you think...
Like, are those common traits?
Yeah, are those common?
Like, do a lot of people with ADD love to read, or are they all fiercely independent?
Yeah, or is that just Carolyn?
It makes you wonder.
And then we meet another character, Maria. And Maria's story is really interesting because...
She didn't even realize she had ADD until she was an adult.
She was masking it the whole time.
I know, isn't that crazy?
So she's high functioning.
Oh, yeah. She's like super organized and successful.
She's got it all together.
But she just felt like something was missing.
But she's not reaching her full potential.
Right. Like there was this nagging feeling
Yeah.
that she could be doing more.
And the book explains that this is actually
Really common. Especially for women.
Especially for women, because they kind of
You develop these coping mechanisms.
yeah, they learn to
mask it.
yeah.
So they fly under the radar.
And so you wonder how many people are out there
Right.
that are undiagnosed
Who are just struggling silently.
because they've just learned to cope. And it's almost like it was holding her back from really
From excelling.
Even though she's seen
And the surface, she had it all together.
Right.
But underneath, she was struggling.
and then getting diagnosed. Was this relief for her?
It was like a light bulb moment.
Yeah.
Like, oh, that's what's been going on all these years.
It all makes sense now.
Exactly.
If any of this is resonating with you, be sure to like and subscribe down below.
Yeah. We'd love to have you join our community.
We're the Book Summary Podcast.
And we love diving into these fascinating topics.
And we're all about breaking down these complex ideas and sharing those
golden nuggets.
yeah, those little golden nuggets of knowledge from amazing books.
Looks like this one.
Like Driven to Distraction.
Mm.
So are you ready to dive a little deeper into the world of ADD?
I am. Let's do it.
Let's go.
So the book really emphasizes that ADD isn't just one thing.
Yeah, it's not one size fits all. We've said that. But
Right. Yeah.
it exists on a
It's like a spectrum.
on the spectrum.
Yeah.
And there are subtypes.
There are, with all different levels of severity.
And it can co-occur with things like
Anxiety,
depression. Yeah.
all sorts of stuff.
So let's talk about those subtypes.
Okay, let's get into it.
What are some of the ways?
So there's this one called anxious ADD,
Okay.
and it's really interesting.
Anxious ADD.
Yeah. The people with this subtype, they tend to actively seek out things to worry about.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So they're not trying to avoid anxiety?
No, they're drawn to it.
Wow.
Yeah, it's like they use worry as a way to try and organize their thoughts.
So it's almost like the anxiety gives them...
It gives them a sense of structure.
Yeah.
Even though it's uncomfortable, it's like, okay, now I have something to focus on.
So it's like a paradox.
It is. It's fascinating, right?
It's so interesting.
Yeah. And that just goes to show how complex ADD can be.
Right. It's so much more than just
being scatterbrained.
being scattered.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about the individual experience of ADD.
Yeah.
But the book also talks about
About families.
the impact it can have on families.
Right, because it affects the whole family system.
And there's a story about a young girl named Penny.
Oh, Penny! I remember her.
And Penny was actually misdiagnosed.
Yeah, she was originally thought to have language problems.
Yeah, before they realized she had ADD.
Poor Penny.
And so what was interesting about her story to you...
I think what really stood out to me was just how much her struggles impacted her whole family.
Right. It wasn't just her. It was everyone around her.
Exactly. And it highlighted how important family support is.
Yeah.
Having that understanding and that willingness to adapt.
But it also talks about how traditional parenting techniques
sometimes they just don't work.
don't work with kids with ADD.
It's like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole.
And that can lead to
A lot of frustration.
a lot of frustration for both sides.
For everyone involved.
So how does the book suggest that parents approach these situations differently?
Well, first and foremost, it emphasizes that parents shouldn't blame themselves.
Oh, that's so important.
It's not your fault.
Right.
And it's not the child's fault either.
Right.
It's about understanding that their brains work differently.
So it's not about punishment.
No, it's about finding new approaches.
Okay.
Approaches that are tailored to the child's needs.
So you kind of have to adapt your parenting style
Exactly.
to fit the child.
Yeah. You got it.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. It's about meeting them where they are.
And speaking of adapting, let's talk about
Treatment options.
treatment.
Yeah. What does the book say about managing ADD?
And the book obviously goes into treatment options.
Yeah.
And while medication can be effective,
It can be really helpful for a lot of people.
for many people, it really emphasizes this
A holistic approach.
holistic approach.
Yeah.
So it's not just about medication.
No, it's about looking at the whole picture.
It's about education,
Right.
behavioral modification,
Therapy.
therapy, all of these things.
Family therapy, couples therapy.
Yeah.
It's about supporting the individual and their relationships.
Yeah, and I remember there was this really interesting analogy in the book about how external structure,
Oh, I love that analogy.
it can be beneficial for people with ADD.
It's so good.
It was something about spilled mercury.
Yes. It's like, imagine you have spilled mercury, right?
Right.
It's all over the place. It's hard to contain. But if you give it a container,
Right.
it becomes much more manageable.
Yeah.
And that's what external structures do for people with ADD.
Oh, I see.
Like lists, calendars, reminders. They provide that container for their thoughts and actions.
So it's like their brains need that.
That external
An external support.
to help them stay organized.
Okay, I love that analogy.
It's so powerful, right?
Oh, it is.
It really paints a picture of how these tools can be so helpful.
But amidst all the challenges, the book also explores this really intriguing connection between
ADD and creativity.
ADD and creativity, which kind of blew my mind.
Oh, it's fascinating, isn't it?
So what do they have to say about that?
Well, they suggest that people with ADD, with their tendency to think outside the box and their, higher tolerance for chaos and disarrangement, they might actually have an advantage in creative fields.
So those same traits that might make it difficult to, say, focus in a traditional work environment could actually be
assets in a more creative setting.
Strengths.
Yeah, strengths in disguise.
It's a totally different way of looking at it.
It is. It's about reframing the narrative.
So instead of seeing it as a negative, we can start to see it as
a different way of experiencing the world.
It's a unique way of experiencing the world.
With its own set of challenges.
With its own challenges.
But also its own advantages.
And its own advantages.
Exactly.
It's about embracing neurodiversity.
It is.
Right?
Yeah.
That there's no one right way for a brain to work.
Absolutely.
That's such a powerful message.
It is.
So before we wrap up this part of our deep dives, is there anything else?
Oh, I just wanted to emphasize that if any of this is resonating with you, you're not alone.
Yeah.
ADD is much more common than people realize.
Right.
And there are resources available to help.
Yeah.
And there's a whole community of people who understand what you're going through.
That's so important to remember.
And seeking help is a sign of strength.
Yes.
Not weakness.
So if you're feeling overwhelmed
or alone
in this,
yeah,
remember there is help available.
Yeah, reach out.
Reach out.
Don't suffer in silence.
Yeah, and for those of you who are intrigued by what we've discussed so far,
stick around for part 2.
Be sure to stick around for part 2. We're going to be going even deeper into Driven to Distraction.
We're going to unpack even more insights from the book.
And in the meantime, if you're enjoying this deep dive, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel.
Yeah, we appreciate your support.
For more explorations of the world of books and ideas.
We love exploring these topics.
We're all about making complex topics accessible and enjoyable. So join us on this journey.
It's going to be fun.
Of learning and discovery.
We'll see you in part 2.
We'll be back after a short break.
Welcome back, everyone. We're diving even deeper into the world of ADD with our exploration of Driven to Distraction. And before the break, we were talking about how this book doesn't just focus on the challenges, but also shines a light on the potential.
Yeah, the potential and even the advantages that can come with ADD. It's kind of
It's a refreshing perspective.
It is a refreshing perspective, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and one of the most intriguing things, I think, is this connection between ADD and creativity.
Oh, yeah. We touched on that a little bit before.
Yeah, we did. And remember how we were talking about Carolyn, who channeled her energy into becoming this successful therapist?
Right.
And the authors suggest that maybe this isn't just a coincidence.
Yeah, they're saying it's actually like
the ADD brain.
A feature, not a bug.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that it's wired for
novelty,
divergent thinking, and that can be a breeding ground for
creativity. Yeah.
So it's almost like instead of seeing it as a detriment,
totally,
it could be a superpower.
A superpower.
Right.
In disguise.
That's a pretty radical shift in thinking.
It is.
But I'm wondering, are there any specific examples, like in the book?
Oh, yeah. They get into...
Yeah.
They actually talk about specific fields where people with ADD tend to do really well.
Okay, so like what kind of fields are we talking about?
So they mention things like entrepreneurship.
Okay.
The arts.
Makes sense.
Certain areas of science and technology.
Okay.
Like anything where you have to think outside the box.
Right.
Come up with new ideas.
Yeah, be innovative.
Be innovative, exactly. That's where ADD can really shine.
I'm thinking about those eureka moments.
I know.
Those light bulb moments.
Yeah, those sudden insights.
Yeah.
Could it be that the ADD brain is kind of like...
primed for that.
Primed?
Yeah, because it's always it's like, all these thoughts and ideas bouncing around.
You're making those connections, maybe.
Yeah, making connections that other people might miss.
That's so interesting.
It is.
So the ADD brain is like the supercharged engine.
It is. It's always running, constantly going.
Even when you don't want it to be.
Generating ideas and making connections. But we've been talking a lot about kids and even adults kind of in that younger phase.
Uh-huh.
But the book also spends a lot of time talking about adults with ADD.
Right, because
Yeah.
it's not just a childhood thing.
Why is that so important?
Well, for a long time, people thought you just grew out of it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like it was a phase.
Okay.
But we now know that's not true.
Go.
A lot of adults continue to struggle with ADD.
Even if they were never diagnosed as kids.
Exactly. And it can actually get harder in adulthood.
Exactly. And it can actually get harder in adulthood.
Really? Why is that?
Well, think about it. Life gets more complicated.
Yeah, you've got more responsibilities.
More responsibilities, more demands, relationships, kids, finances, you name it.
Okay.
It's a lot to juggle.
It's like all of a sudden the stakes are higher.
Yeah, the stakes are definitely higher.
Yeah, but you would think with all that life experience,
You think so, right?
they would have developed...
And pretty good coping mechanisms?
Well, a lot of them have.
Yeah.
They have, either consciously or unconsciously.
Yeah.
But the problem is those coping mechanisms can only take you so far.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, they might work for a while.
So they're not sustainable.
Exactly. They're not sustainable in the long run.
Okay, and what are some of the specific challenges?
Well, the book talks about things like procrastination,
Oh, yeah.
disorganization,
Classic.
difficulty following through on commitments,
Yeah.
feeling overwhelmed, like all the time.
It sounds exhausting.
It is. It's exhausting. And the thing is, a lot of this is happening internally.
Oh, so you might not
You might not even know.
even know.
Yeah, someone might seem totally fine on the surface.
Yeah, they might look successful.
But inside, they're struggling.
Right.
Like they're trying to hold it all together.
Yeah, they're just barely keeping their head above water.
Exactly. And that can lead to all sorts of problems.
Like what kind of problem?
Well, relationship problems,
Yeah.
job instability,
Makes sense.
financial difficulties,
Yeah.
stress, anxiety.
Like a domino effect.
It's a domino effect.
Yeah. And so that's why diagnosis and treatment are still so important,
Absolutely, even in adulthood.
even in adulthood.
Because once you know what you're dealing with,
Yeah.
you can start to manage it more effectively.
Okay, and what does that look like?
Well, the book emphasizes the importance of finding a doctor who really understands ADD,
Okay, so someone who...
who specializes in it,
Okay.
and having a thorough evaluation.
Yeah, not just like a quick checklist.
No, it's got to be more in-depth than that.
Okay, so it's personalized.
It's personalized,
Like
yeah.
that.
It's about understanding your specific history, your symptoms,
How it's affecting you.
exactly, and then developing a treatment plan that's tailored to you.
So it could include medication,
It could, yeah.
therapy,
coaching,
lifestyle changes.
lifestyle changes, yeah. It's a combination of things.
Like a multi-pronged approach.
Exactly. It's about finding what works best for you.
Okay. And one thing that I really liked was the book's emphasis on
Self-awareness.
self-awareness.
Yes, knowing yourself.
Yeah, like really understanding
Understanding your strengths.
your strengths and your weaknesses. So you can use that knowledge
To your advantage.
to figure out how to
To develop coping mechanisms
manage it.
that really work for you.
Okay, so it's like taking all that information and then turning it into action.
Exactly.
Were there any specific tips that you found helpful?
Oh, yeah, they had this great concept called pattern planning.
Okay.
I don't know what that is.
It's basically creating a schedule for things you do regularly.
Okay, so like a routine.
Yeah, a routine. So it becomes automatic.
Oh, I see.
You don't have to think about it.
So you're removing that decision-making process.
Exactly. Because for people with ADD, decisions can be paralyzing.
Okay.
So if you can automate those everyday tasks.
It frees up your mental energy.
Exactly. You can focus on other things.
I love that.
It's a game changer
You're like tricking your brain. You're hacking your brain.
to stay on track.
Exactly.
I also remember the book talking about external structures.
Oh, yeah, those are crucial.
Like lists and calendars and reminders.
Anything that helps you stay organized.
It's like,
So like building a scaffolding
Yeah.
for your brain.
yeah, giving it that support.
Yeah, that external support that it needs.
Okay. And it doesn't have to be rigid.
No, it's about finding what works for you.
Yeah.
Like some people might need
A detailed planner.
a detailed planner.
Others might just need a whiteboard.
Yeah.
With a few key reminders.
And that leads us to support systems.
Oh, yeah. Those are so important.
I remember the book talking about,
Involving others in your journey with ADD.
yeah, like family, friends,
Colleagues,
That
therapists,
goes
or
through-
groups
having that network.
can make a huge difference.
Like you need people to understand what you're going through.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the book also had some great advice for parents of kids with ADD. Oh, yeah. Lots of good tips in there.
About creating a supportive environment at home.
Right. It's about focusing on the child's strengths,
Yeah.
creating structure, clear communication, and positive reinforcement.
So it's not about punishing the bad behavior.
No, it's about rewarding the good behavior
Oh, I see.
and celebrating their unique qualities.
So it's about shifting the focus from what's wrong with my kid
Totally.
to how can I support my kid?
Yeah, it's a mindset shift.
And that actually applies to adults with ADD too.
Absolutely.
We all need support.
Yeah, you need people in your life
Who get it?
who understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the most powerful messages of driven to distraction.
What's that?
That ADD doesn't have to be this isolating,
Right.
debilitating thing.
It can be challenging,
Yeah, of course.
but it doesn't have to control your life.
And with the right tools and support,
And understand
and still live
a meaningful and fulfilling life.
Absolutely.
And that's
empowering. Empowering. Yeah.
Yeah. And it reminds us that ADD is just one
Aspect of who you are.
part of a person.
Yeah,
It doesn't define you.
exactly.
It doesn't limit your worth
Or your potential.
or your potential.
Right.
And speaking of potential, remember how we were talking about
ADD and creativity.
that link between ADD and creativity?
Yeah, that was a good one.
It's worth pointing out that
It's not a guarantee.
not everyone with ADD is going to be like,
Creative genius.
right. But it does open up this really interesting possibility
It does.
that maybe some of the things that we think of as
As weaknesses.
could be
Strengths in disguise.
strengths.
Yeah.
It's like you're looking at it from a different angle.
It's a different lens.
Yeah.
A different perspective.
And I think that's something we can all take away from this
Conversation.
from this whole conversation.
Yeah.
The importance of challenging our assumptions.
Right. Questioning those assumptions.
Embracing the diversity of human experience
of how our brains work.
and how our brains are wired.
Oh, yeah.
And that leads us to the final part
Ooh, the grand finale.
of our deep dive. Are you ready to wrap up our exploration of driven to distraction?
I am. I'm excited to hear your final thoughts.
Welcome back to the Book Summary Podcast and the final part of our deep dive into driven to distraction.
Yeah.
And, we've talked about so much already.
Oh, so much good stuff.
From, the history of ADD, the social consequences of ADD, the different ways that it can show up,
The challenges, the opportunities.
the challenges, the opportunities, particularly in adulthood.
Yeah.
But as we wrap up, what are some of those key takeaways?
The things that really stuck with me.
Yeah.
One that keeps coming back to me is the book's emphasis on self-compassion.
Okay.
It's so easy for people with ADD to beat themselves up.
Yeah.
To feel like they're not good enough.
Yeah, you're constantly failing.
Yeah, always falling short.
Yeah.
But the book reminds us that ADD is not a personal failing.
Right.
It's a neurological condition.
It's how your brain is wired.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's not about blaming yourself.
Right.
It's about understanding yourself.
Yeah, and working with your brain.
Working with your brain, not against it.
And the book does such a great job, I think, of just kind of taking this mysterious,
Demystifying it.
demystifying it
Yeah.
and breaking it down.
Yeah, making it relatable.
Yeah, into something that's understandable and relatable.
And they give some really good practical advice, too.
Yeah, like what were some of the tips that really...
Oh, I love the pattern planning.
Yeah, pattern plan, we talked about that.
But another one that I found really helpful was the idea of breaking down big tasks into smaller chunks.
Okay.
They call it microtasking.
Microtasking.
And it just makes things so much more manageable.
It's less overwhelming.
Maybe less overwhelming.
Because instead of looking at this big, huge project...
Yeah, you just focus on one little step at a time.
Yeah.
And it plays to the ADD brain's strength.
Which is...
novelty. And those short bursts of focus.
Right, like you get that little...
That little dopamine hit.
Yeah, that little reward.
Every time you can complete a mini task.
Yeah, so it's like you're tricking your brain to stay on track.
You're totally tricking your brain.
And it made me think about how some people with ADD, they need that background noise or music to focus.
Oh, yeah, like that white noise.
Yeah, it's like their brains need that extra stimulation.
Like that extra input
Yeah.
to stay engaged.
And the book actually talks about that.
It does. It does.
It talks about how sensory input is so important.
Yeah, and it's different for everyone.
Right, because some people are very sensitive to noise.
Totally. Some people need silence.
Yeah.
Others need that background hum.
Yeah, and so it's about understanding what works for you.
Exactly. Customizing your environment.
Yeah, and that goes back to support systems too.
Support systems, yeah. Can't forget those.
The book talked about the importance of that.
Oh, it's crucial.
Whether it's family, friends, a therapist,
Coaches, support groups.
having that network.
It makes all the difference.
Yeah, it does.
Knowing that you're not alone.
Yeah, having people who get it.
Yeah.
And the book also talks about how important that is for parents of kids with ADD,
Oh, yeah, especially parents.
about creating that supportive environment at home
Right.
and being clear with communication, setting up routines.
Consistency is key.
Yeah, positive reinforcement.
Yes. Focus on the good stuff.
Yeah, so instead of focusing on all the negative stuff,
Punishing, scolding.
yeah, catch them doing something good
Exactly.
and reward them for it
Celebrate those wins.
and celebrate their strengths and talents.
Absolutely. Every kid has strengths.
Yeah, so it's about shifting the paradigm
It is a paradigm shift.
from fixing to supporting.
Yeah, from fixing to understanding.
Understanding and
Being
accepting
embracing.
and recognizing that ADD is not
Somewhere to be ashamed of.
something to be ashamed of. It's just
It's a different way of thinking,
a different way of
a
being.
different way of experiencing the world.
And that difference can be challenging,
It can.
but it can also be a source of
Creativity.
creativity, innovation,
Resilience.
resilience.
Resourcefulness.
Yeah, like all of these amazing things.
It's a gift in a way.
It is a gift.
Yeah.
And I love how you phrase that. It's about embracing
Neurodiversity.
neurodiversity
Yeah.
and recognizing that there's not one right way
For a brain to work.
for a brain to be.
Exactly.
And I think that's the big takeaway from Driven to Distraction.
It is.
It's challenging us to think differently.
To expand our understanding of what's normal.
Yeah, what does normal even mean?
Yeah, who gets to decide that?
And to really celebrate those differences.
The beautiful tapestry of human minds.
It's a call to action.
It is a call to action.
To create a world that is
More inclusive.
more inclusive,
More accommodating.
where people with ADD can
Mhm.
thrive and reach their full potential.
Absolutely. We need more of that.
And for anyone out there listening who may be feeling a little
Over-
overwhelmed or discouraged,
Yeah, or alone.
yeah, remember there's hope.
There is hope.
There is help,
There's help available.
and there's a whole community of people who understand
Oh, great.
what you're going through.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid to reach out.
Reach out. Connect.
Ask for support.
Find your people.
Yeah, you are not alone in this journey.
You are not alone.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
I just want to say if anything we talked about today resonated with you,
Yeah.
if you had any of those aha moments.
Those light bulb moments.
Yeah.
I encourage you to check out the book.
Yeah, Driven to Distraction. It's full of amazing stories and practical advice. And it really does offer
A message of hope.
a message of hope. And for those of you who are new to the Book Summary podcast, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of our
Future deep dives.
future deep dives into the world of books and ideas.
We love exploring these topics.
We do, and we're so glad you're here with us on this journey.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for joining us, and until next time, happy reading.